Good morning to everyone on the West Coast, and I guess good afternoon to everyone on the East Coast. My name is Bhakti Kapadia, and I manage our Infor Alliance here at Avalara. I'd like to extend a huge thank you to Crossroads RMC for their partnership and all their efforts in helping organize this webinar today. The webinar, just so we all are on the same page, is what LN customers need to know about sales tax. We're very excited this year with Infor LN version 10.6, Avatax will now be pre-integrated. However, for LN customers that are running versions prior to 10.6, we have partnered with a third party for those integrations. And then for customers that are currently using Bond, Crossroads also has a, can talk to you about building a custom integration as well. Kathy, did you want to add something?
If people are interested, that I will be following up after this to talk about it in detail, but the intention would be if there's enough Bond customers that are interested, it would be a standard integration that we could build, not a custom one. So we can have some discussions for anyone who's interested and talk further about that.
Great. Thanks for clarifying that, Kathy. In addition to myself, I also have Maria Tringali here. Maria Tringali is our Infor sales team lead, and she'll actually be presenting the webinar. And in addition to Maria, we also have Antoine Robinson on the call as well. Antoine Robinson is a principal finance analyst with Immucor. And Immucor is an Infor LN customer that's been using Avatax since 2015. So we've asked Antoine to join the call and to share their experience and just talk a little bit about some of the challenges that they were seeing around sales tax compliance and why they selected Avatax and the benefits that they've seen as a result of their Avatax implementation. And so a big thank you to Antoine for joining the call, and so he'll be talking a little bit further into our webinar. So I am now going to transfer the call over to Maria.
Excellent. Thank you, Beck. Appreciate the introduction. My name is Maria, and I'm an Infor team lead here, and what that means is I assist our sales team with finding the right solutions for manufacturers and distributors. I'm a manufacturing and distribution tax compliance specialist here, and I work with our customers to evaluate what they're doing now, what questions they have about tax compliance, and how to navigate the complex landscape. So I'm delighted to be here and to talk a little bit about the tax compliance landscape for manufacturers in our current environment, as well as tell you a little bit about what Avalara does and how we can help. So with that, let's get right to it. Here's our agenda for today. So I want to talk about the thing that's probably most prevalent on your minds right now, which is Nexus. I know it's been in the news a lot, and if you don't know, Nexus is the responsibility to collect and remit tax in a state, and there's a lot of things changing out there. We'll talk, of course, about exemption certificates, which for manufacturers are really the biggest challenge, even though they don't seem like it. They're the biggest risk. We know a lot of our manufacturers and distributors are starting e-commerce platforms, and they have a lot of questions about how do we start charging tax, especially as our Nexus grows, and we traditionally haven't. Filing, and of course being prepared for that audit, which in this current environment is probably not if, it's going to be a when these days. And of course, I'd love to take questions, so I'll pause a couple times to see if there are any questions, and feel free to interrupt me if you have any questions that are relevant to what I'm talking about. I'd love to address them at that time, so I'll pause a couple times for questions. So feel free to use the chat feature for that. So with that, let's dive into it. The first question is, why do we care? Why are we here? I work with manufacturers and distributors all the time, and what happens, and I laugh, and Beck and I've had this experience many times, that people walk up to our table at an event or a user group and say, well, I'm a manufacturer, I don't need your solution, or we don't charge tax, and they walk away. The truth is every business has tax compliance requirements, whether they're just in one state or they're in all 46 tax jurisdictions in the US or even global. Everyone has tax compliance responsibilities. Why this is getting bigger and bigger on our radar is states have figured out that a very large percent of revenue comes from sales tax and sales tax related income. So basically what they've done is gone out and hired auditors to go out and audit businesses, and they especially love businesses that aren't their constituents, they're outside of the state, and audit those businesses to make sure that they're getting their, what they consider their fair share of your revenue. And we'll talk about the South Dakota versus Wayfair that's been in the news here in just a second and how that's kind of stepped this game up. But whether you're a manufacturer or a retail business or a coffee stand, you still have tax compliance responsibilities. And I'll just mention that here in Washington, where we are right now, Avalara is headquartered in Washington State. We don't have state income tax. So there's a story in the news practically once a week about a sales tax issue or something that's going to be coming to a vote on the next ballot about taxing some item or something in order to generate revenue to our state to fund projects like roads or healthcare or whatever the most recent initiative is. So it's a really big focus in our state. We hear it constantly, and we know that's how we fund things here. So the truth, again, for manufacturers is people say they don't have a sales tax problem. It may not be a problem per se, but it is a responsibility of doing business. And the fact is there is an ongoing burden of time and effort and resources to manage tax compliance. And as a manufacturer, it's not necessarily about charging or collecting sales tax. It's proving why you didn't. So having those exemption certificates on file at the time of the sale is as good as gold. A missing exemption certificate on a sale can be worth thousands of dollars in tax revenue to a state. We're getting a sales tax rate wrong. If you had, say, 8% and it was supposed to be 8.25%, that's a small amount of revenue to your company. So really the risk for manufacturers and distributors in an audit scenario is much greater than a retail because of the value of these certificates. And I talk to probably 10 to 15 companies a day because I work with a lot of reps here. And I can tell you that hardly anybody has a good process for collecting, managing, tracking, and updating their exemption certificates. And it's going to be, it's getting more and more important in our world. So on to that end, the tax calculations is what we normally think of sales tax compliance. Again, that's why when people walk up to our table and look at me a buck and say, we don't charge sales tax, we don't need you. The truth is, for us in our world, for manufacturers, all these things underneath that iceberg are really what we're referring to when it comes to sales tax compliance. You have to worry about or know or understand where your company has established Nexus. And again, that landscape is changing and just changed dramatically here within the last month. Managing, collecting, tracking, renewing those certificates. What about e-commerce? What about when I go B2C? Or what about even my B2B e-commerce? If I want my customers to purchase parts or aftermarket parts or items through my e-commerce platform, how do I validate that they have a certificate on file when they're making that purchase through my website and not calling my front desk or my customer service reps who can look that up? How do I handle that? Are we really ready for an audit? And then who the heck is doing those filings? Where are we running reports? Are we running reports out of multiple systems? All that is what tax compliance is in our world. It's not necessarily those tax calculations. So when you work with a partner, when you start to investigate this, you want a partner that can help you with all these areas, not just a list of rate tables. That's not the answer in our world. So I'm going to talk first about the Nexus challenge because this has been in the news. So traditionally, you've had to have a physical presence in a state, whether that be inventory or sales reps or a facility or an employee in a state or servers in order to have Nexus or have established Nexus in that state, meaning you would need to collect exemption certificates there and then also remit tax returns on a periodic basis to that state. What's come into play recently is item number 4, which is economic nexus. So with the, I'm going to show you a little bit. So with the South Dakota versus Wayfair, or the recent Supreme Court ruling, South Dakota challenged that they wanted to charge Wayfair, wanted Wayfair to start charging tax on their items because they were selling so much into their state and South Dakota wasn't getting a cut of that revenue. So South Dakota challenged that, and it went all the way to the Supreme Court, and ultimately the Supreme Court said because of the changing landscape of the way we do business over the web, it is actually okay to start requiring businesses to collect tax if they're doing a certain amount of revenue in sales or number of transactions in their states. So one of the misconceptions right now is, so that was overturned by the Supreme Court, and it does have to go back to the state of South Dakota to be also ratified there. However, because of all this news and press, states have already begun to implement, states outside of South Dakota have already begun to implement economic nexus laws. There are several states right now that started as of last October, some earlier this year, many on July 1, and many more October 1 that have already put this into place. So this is already an active form of states collecting tax. We have already passed that threshold. So one of the things that a good partner can do is help you explore that in your business, help you get registered, and then manage that compliance moving forward. Next challenge for manufacturers is those darned certificates. As I said, everybody seems to do a decent job of collecting them at the time that they sign a customer up, but managing them, tracking them, and knowing what you're looking at is a totally different story. A lot of time it's a frontline staff or even a salesperson that collects these. They don't necessarily know what they're looking at. They don't know that it's the right form. They collect the document, they stick it in the file and say, we're good to go. But what happens when that auditor comes in and wants proof that you had it on file the date of the sale? What if it's outdated? What if it's expired? Many states, about 20% of states, do have actual expiration dates for these certificates. Florida, for example, wants them renewed every year. So if you collected one in Florida a few years ago, it's not valid today. It's expired. And again, if you had a sale there and it was many thousands of dollars and you did not collect tax on that, the auditor is going to want you to come up with the money. And this can cause problems both financially as well as customer service problems. If you want to go back to that customer and say, oops, we didn't have your proper certificate, we need to charge you tax on that sale, that's not going to be a good customer service experience. So big challenge in our world, and one single missing certificate can cost companies tons of money. E-commerce. So a lot of companies, manufacturers have moved into, or at least are dipping their toe into the e-commerce world. It's a growing driver. It's for the Nexus growth. It's a added revenue for companies. But if the tax compliance is not managed properly, there can also be added administrative duties of managing this. It also adds another system. So we may have some tax rates and customer information in our ERP, but how do we get that into our e-commerce platform? How do we create consistencies across? What if the tax rate is different in my e-commerce solution than it is in my ERP? What happens when that invoice comes into my ERP? So there are lots of things to consider when starting up e-commerce or when growing your e-commerce platform, and tax compliance is one of them. We get tons and tons of calls from IT professionals that are developing a new website for a manufacturer. They've never had to charge tax before, and all they want are some rate tables, and they know nothing about tax compliance. So we spend a lot of time doing some education on, it's not just rates. What if the product has different taxability in that state? How are you going to keep up with those? Tax reporting requires local jurisdictions. A tax table is not going to give you the local jurisdiction tax information. So it seems to be a project that is sent to IT, but it really, a big part of it, the finance team needs to also be involved in. So a good partner is going to help you with that challenge as well and create some consistencies. So as I stated, so state and local tax prep is a challenge. Another thing that Buck and I hear, and this does make me giggle, when we ask them about what states they're registered in and where they're filing, the response I often get is, well, all of our returns are $0, so it's nothing. And I just have to giggle because if I do my income tax and I don't actually owe any tax, which never actually happens, but if I don't actually owe any tax, that doesn't mean that I don't have to go through the exercise of pulling all my paperwork and filling out the forms and the additional forms because I'm itemizing, et cetera. Even if the bottom line is 0, you still have to have the reporting and information and take the time to fill out all these forms and submit them. And now that they're online, they may seem easier, but they're still a form. And of course, because they're online, the state reserves the right to change them all the time. So you might go in next month and see different fields and different forms required than last month. So it's actually a bigger challenge than people make it out to be. And again, if your Nexus footprint is growing, if it turns out in our changing environment, you need to add states that you need to report in, that's going to be an additional cost, an additional time and burden on your staff. So something that manufacturers definitely have to do and like to sort of sweep under the rug and say this is not a big responsibility, but at the end of the day it is. I talk to people that it could take them a week to a week and a half every month just to run the reports and fill out these forms. Doesn't matter how much they owe. That's really not the point. It's the process of filling them out. And being ready for an audit is super important and something that manufacturers have not really worried about because they figure, well, we don't owe much tax, so they can't really get us on anything. But the fact is being prepared for that audit is super important, and the cost of an audit is very expensive and very time consuming. The biggest cost is typically going back and looking for all those certificates, so that item number 2 there. An auditor will say, I want to see these certificates, and the team will say, oh shoot, let's go dig through the files, let's call some customers, and it's a very time-consuming, costly exercise to go dig those up and try to prove that you had them the day of the sale. It can take months, years even, to go back and get this information, really delay an audit and a big staff burden on your team. So why do companies outsource? As I mentioned, that cost of compliance is really high. We do outside research, both with Aberdeen and with Wakefield, every couple of years. And the cost of compliance to a company nowadays on an annual basis is anywhere between $67,000 and $400,000. It's a very expensive project just to manage tax compliance. And even though we're spending all this money, and this is small to medium-sized businesses, we are an SMB company. We do have a lot of enterprise customers, very, very large customers. But this research is really based on the small and mid-sized market of businesses. So for enterprise companies, this cost can be even higher. And even though we're putting all this money and effort towards this, 75% of companies admit that an auditor is still likely to find mistakes. This is not easy stuff. And it's also non-revenue generating. All of these things are a business cost, and that's why it's important to look for a good partner and outsource or at least partner with someone to improve your processes and save yourself a lot of revenue and redirect those internal resources towards revenue generating activities, towards customer service activities, towards things that are actually going to grow your business. I'm going to pause there. We've talked a lot about compliance. Are there any questions about Nexus or the Wayfair case or anything that we've talked about so far that I can answer for you?
Are they all muted or?
Yeah, and there's no questions in the chat.
Questions in the chat? Okay.
Okay, great.
Thanks so much. All right, so I'm going to continue though. So let's talk a little bit about Avalara. So Avalara is a suite of products and services that address the challenges that we've been discussing. We know where we have a software that integrates with LN, as Buck mentioned up front, and integrates with other systems as well. So if you have multiple systems in e-commerce, And so we'll manage where you have Nexus for you. You can add a jurisdiction with just one click into our system. We help you centralize the collection, management, and tracking of those exemption certificates, as well as validate that you have one on file the day of the sale, which is, of course, what the auditor is going to be looking for.
We do have a question.
Okay, I'll pause there. What's our question?
The question is, how frequently do exemption certificates expire?
Right, so about 20% of certificates across the U.S. actually have an expiration date, and that is anywhere from this year, the calendar year in Florida, to I think it's 5 years in Illinois. California say they technically don't expire, but we recommend that those that don't expire, you set them to expire in our system or your own system every 3 to 4 years, just to make sure you have one. So there's no consistency. Just like anything in the sales tax world, our favorite answer is it depends. States in our country are allowed to make their own rules, and so they can set these rules any way they want. Within our platform, there's actually a matrix, which if we do a demonstration for you, I can dive into that and show you. We actually have a matrix, and that's how our system knows what states certificates of any type might expire. There are job-based certificates, manufacturing certificates, resale, etc. There's many, there's healthcare, there's government, there's many types of certificates, and they can have rules around them individually in any state or any jurisdiction. So there's no straight answer to that question. You have to know what state you're dealing with, what certificate you're dealing with, and what the rules are that apply to that specific certificate, unfortunately. Anything else, Buck?
No, that was the question.
Okay. Good. That's a great question, actually. A lot of people think this stuff is across the board, and that's the part of the complexity is we allow that our states to make all of their own sales tax rules. So as I mentioned, we also integrate with shopping carts, we integrate with custom systems, we integrate with quoting systems, with Salesforce. So in addition to our Infor integrations, we have over 600 integrations with different products to calculate tax and bring that data into a centralized admin console for reporting. So we centralize reporting. Having that centralized database allows you to be much more prepared in an audit scenario. You have a dashboard with everything right in front of you in that audit situation. You can answer questions at the drop of a hat. And then, of course, as we talked about the state and local tax filing prep, our dashboard includes in-depth reporting better than any ERP system out there where it breaks down jurisdictions. We actually automate the completion and remittance of forms, et cetera, and we can talk more about that. But our entire suite supports everything to do with tax compliance for manufacturers. And just for your information, I don't think I mentioned this at the get-go, but at Avalara, about 20 to 25% of our customers are manufacturers and distributors. This is a huge portion of business for us, something that manufacturers have not really delved into in recent years, and it's growing tremendously. We have many salespeople on our team that are focused on your area and helping to educate manufacturers on what the requirements are and reduce the risk for their business. So a little more specifics here. Let's talk about how this solution actually works. So we're an end-to-end solution, as we've discussed. So we integrate with systems. So the most important thing to you is to collect those certificates. So when you sign up certificates, you'll collect that certificate. Instead of sticking it in a drawer or putting it in a file or even scanning a copy of it and putting it on a shared drive, you would save that certificate in CertCapture, which is a data management or document management, system designed specifically for exemption certificates of all types. We know we can identify what type of certificate is, track it, and validate that you have one on file the date of the sale. So the first thing we do is check for that certificate. So with that integration, about 10, 12 pieces of data will come across to us. We'll take a look at that customer name. The first thing we'll do is look for a certificate. If there is a certificate on file, we're not going to calculate any tax. If there isn't one, we're going to calculate the right amount of tax for each item on that invoice. So if it is a piece of equipment and it's taxed at the regular tax rate, we'll do that. If it's freight and that's taxed differently in your state, we're going to identify the right tax rate for that. If it's a service or a repair and that's taxed differently in your state, we're going to identify that. We're also going to drill right down into those local jurisdictions. We have about 100 people in that little Avalara cloud there. We have about 100 people, maybe more now, in our compliance department that keep up with all of the rates, rules, and boundaries on a daily basis. They literally have relationships with taxing jurisdictions. They know when different laws are going into effect, and they update our tax engine. So let me be clear, we're not pushing any rates into your system, any tax rate lists. You are literally accessing the most current rates, rules, and boundaries in our cloud environment and on real-time basis. So next week is the beginning of August. If a tax rate goes up as of August 1st, if you ran an order as of July 31st and the tax rate was a certain percent, and then those rates changed as of August 1st, when you finalize that invoice after the 1st of August, we're going to rerun that and update those tax rates so that your final invoice has the proper tax rates. So we're always ahead of the game. And then because your information, your transactional data information is flowing through the Avatax engine, the final invoice data are stamped on the Avalara, in the Avalara admin console. And that information is what we use to create very detailed reporting and dynamically fill out all of the tax returns that you're required to complete. You tell us during setup what your returns, where you have to file and what forms you're filing and what the frequency is. So the software knows that. It'll fill out those forms. You only have to do a reconciliation and make sure that that data matches what you have in your GL on your side before we remit that, and then we're going to remit them and any revenues due on your behalf. And we guarantee that we'll file those on time as well as take advantage of any early filing discounts. So most of our customers take their month-end filing process from days to hours with our system, maybe even less than an hour. And if you're just using one system, everything is right unless you made any changes post month-end. When we close the transfer of data to fill out those forms. So very easy process. This is probably the most dramatic savings for our customers as far as time on their staff. So any questions? I see a highlight there. Was that the previous question?
No, there are
Any
no additional questions.
Okay, great. Let's do the other one. All right. So, please, my mouse. Mr. Mouse. There we go. So Avalara our tax rates are accurate. One thing I didn't mention is we do have an accuracy guarantee. So we do guarantee that those 100 people that are doing all that work, that all the rates, rules, and boundaries in our system are accurate. It creates dramatic efficiencies in a non-revenue generating department of your company. And of course, we have integrations with pretty much anything that you can integrate with. So with that, let's talk about a couple of customers. So we have, how many Infor customers, Beth?
200?
Several hundred Infor customers, and as I mentioned, about 25% of our customers are manufacturers and distributors, and we have over 20,000 customers globally. So this is a very, very small sample of a couple of customers, and we have Antoine here to chat with us about his experience. And before I turn it over to him, I just want to let you know that we also have plenty of references, lots and lots of happy customers. We have a very, very low turnover rate. No one really automates. I kind of look at it like returning your smartphone. Once you automate this stuff, you are not going to go back. And it's very, very similar to outsourcing payroll, as many of you probably already do. You don't want to get that wrong. You don't want to get the forms that go into the state wrong. You don't want to give the auditors any reason to audit you, and you certainly don't want a bad customer experience by getting rates wrong or exemptions. So with that, Antoine, let's love to have some feedback from you on your experience. I'm trying to get my mouse over there.
Sorry.
He's been a customer with us since 2015. So welcome, Antoine. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me today. Just to give you a quick background on myself. My role in Ecommerce, I'm the liaison between the finance and IT department. And so I handle all matters related to finance, whether it's invoicing to taxation. And so my involvement in our Avalara project was centered around Core was upgrading our ERP system from Bond 4.0 system to LN10 platform. And we were looking for a solution to manage our tax process. So prior to that, we did a lot of the download tax rates and relied upon keeping rates current, and we had the file cabinets filled with certificates, and so we try to manage our tax sales and use tax process that way until we ran into an audit. And at that point, when we were looking for information, trying to justify what rates were charged, et cetera, we realized we needed a more robust solution as we upgraded our ERP system. And so we looked into several vendors, partners with Infor, and came across Avalara and what Avalara was doing at the time back in 2015. And so we took a closer look at the Avalara and realized that they offer what we were looking for, which was an end-to-end solution for managing our taxation process. And once we looked into Avalara, we realized that like a lot of the challenges we're facing with certificate management, with keeping up with the correct tax rates, Nexus, et cetera, will resolve our issue. Just taking a step back, we, Ecommerce, we have 4 manufacturing facilities. And so the project of upgrading our ERP systems has extended over several years. And so the initial part of our project, we were looking at some of our smaller facilities to implement not only the ERP system, but as well as Avalara. So we needed a system to be able to grow with us as we continue this project. A couple of other points about Avalara that we like is the fact of the ease of the implementation. Like I said before, I am on the IT side as well as the finance side. I'm the liaison between the two. And so I was pretty much responsible for managing this project. And a lot of times you'll get into projects that will extend over a course of months. With us, for the 2 sites that we have on Avalara since 2015, it was a pretty seamless process. It was really easy to go through and work with the implementation specialist that we had assigned to us, and to go through the process of converting all of our certificates that were stored in file cabinets and drawers, et cetera, to put them into our capture system, which is the automated system for managing certificates. And so once we got the system into our test environment and we did some beta testing and we realized how easy the system was, we kind of kicked our stuff and said we should have been doing this a long time ago. It made our job so much easier, both from an IT side, from managing monthly tax rates, et cetera, to the actual business process side of being able to have the information they needed readily available during audits and for validation of certain tax rates. Any questions so far before I continue?
There actually is a question, and the question
Sure,
is, did Ecommerce compare Avalara against Vertex O series as part of their decision? And if so, what was
yes.
the differentiator that made you pick Avalara over Vertex O?
So we looked at Vertex, which is, as everybody on the call probably know, is one of the leaders in, or very familiar leader in the sales tax market. And we, at Ecommerce, when we looked at them, we realized that they do offer similar products and solutions as Avalara. But for us, what we were looking for not only was the products and solution, but we're also looking at the cost. Because ultimately everything kind of boils down to cost. And typically when you get into the tax area and you talk about departments and et cetera, like the taxes, you want to be able to minimize the cost of implementation of a solution based on the amount of return you'll get from actually implementing that. And so for us, Avalara was very cost effective. It was the best solution for us from a cost perspective and from an ease of implementation and ease for upgrading from one location to the next. Like I said, we did one site on Avalara. It took us, I think, roughly 90 days to get it implemented. And then we migrated another site a year and a half later, and it was a matter of a month or 2 because we already had the base there. And so for us, we've been pretty pleased. Just talking to the people in our tax department, they love the solution. It's very easy to manage. There's no question on if you have the right sales tax rate. And then, of course, with us, a couple of our smaller sites, we do Nexus in probably half of the states in the U.S. So for us, keeping up with all of the different changes, it was like easy for Avalara to do that. Does that answer the question?
Yes, there's a response was thanks for the detailed answer.
Sorry. Okay. The last thing I wanted to touch upon here, and then I'll turn it back over to our presenter, is as a manufacturing company, for us, again, we're in the business of manufacturing products, and our tax department in-house is very small. When I say very small, we have essentially 3 people that run our tax department. And so if we're doing Nexus in 50 different states, you can imagine the number of returns, et cetera, that has to be done. And so having Avalara as the core of our automation for our tax process makes it very easy and efficient for this small group of people to manage all of the different complexities related to sales tax. And again, I think the eye-opener for us was once we've gone through an audit and have to prove a customer was exempt and looking for this information, the amount of time and resources that we spent trying to prove this information, we realized that as we upgraded our ERP system, we had to make sure we close that gap in our company. So we're very pleased with the product, very pleased with the turnaround when you talk to support from a support perspective. They're very on top of returning calls, very engaged in making sure that we have a system set up to optimize how we're using it. So from our perspective as a customer, we're very happy with it. That's all I have for right now. If there's any more questions, I'll go ahead and answer those. If not, I'll turn it back over to the presenter.
So we do have a question, but it's for Avalara, and Maria actually has a slide around pricing, but the question is, what is a ballpark annual cost to have a solution for USA and LN 10.6? So I'm going to let Maria actually address that. Do you want to maybe jump to the slide that talks about pricing?
Yeah, of course.
Thank you so much, Antoine. Really appreciate all that information, sharing your experience.
Yes, thank you, Antoine.
Oh, you're welcome. No problem. No problem at all.
And perhaps we'll see you at Inform.
Awesome. Appreciate your time. So I'm going to talk about pricing in just 1 second. I want to pop through this slide just to give you a little bit of a background on our company. I mentioned most of this as we were going through the presentation, but tax compliance and sales tax compliance is all that we do. We were founded in 2004 here in Seattle, and as I mentioned, we have over 20,000 customers, and we bring on 300 or more every month and take them live. Really growing quickly. We do billions of transactions every year. We handle things like Black Friday for retailers. We manage millions of exemption certificates, and we are are we the biggest or one of the biggest remitters of sales tax in most states because we consolidate. So all we do is sales tax. We don't do income tax. So we really specialize in this. And we find that partners, CPA partners, managing sales tax is not a very lucrative business for them. Sometimes they know their local state, they may know things about surrounding states, but we know everything about every state. We have former sales tax auditors that work for us. So when you're working with us, Infor obviously is partnered with us, so when you're working with us, think of us as that tax compliance partner. And that's sort of source of truth that you can go to when you have questions or concerns. We don't specialize in anything else. We're all sales tax all the time. So addressing the pricing question, it is nearly impossible for us to give you a price without knowing about your business. These 3 items listed here are our core products. There are also some services, many services that we offer as well. It is a transaction-based model, so we would need to understand how many documents you're actually calculating tax on in your Nexus states, how many certificates you're stored, how many returns you're filing. Do we need to do a Nexus study? And do we need to do that on an ongoing basis? Do we need to do some backfiling? So there's a lot of investigation that goes into putting together pricing. I don't know what the average Infor price is. I'm guessing, I don't know what it is, maybe.
I honestly, I don't know off the top of my head what the ASP is.
Yeah, I don't know the actual average for an Infor customer. It's really dependent. We have customers that pay a few $1,000s a year. They're selling really big ticket items and do a few invoices and have just a few car manufacturers as their customers, to companies who are much larger, like Antoine's, that are doing a lot of things and have a lot of bells and whistles and maybe paying thousands and thousands of dollars. So it's really hard for me. I'm sorry, I don't mean to be vague, but hard to give us an answer. We'd have to actually delve into your processes. And I just want to mention that sometimes when people see that number of final documents as part of the Avatax charge, they get scared because they might sell small ticket items. We do create packages for manufacturers and distributors that sort of adjust that document-based model based on how you're using the system. So don't let something like that say, oh, we have too many documents, it's probably going to be super expensive, so we don't even want to chat with them. We definitely have special packages for things like that. So we want to make sure you have the right solution, and we may do a tiered implementation plan. We have lots of creativity. So if you want to know more about that, we need to learn about your business, so you can reach out to us and give you more information on that. That's it for the PowerPoint slides. We do have a couple of minutes left, we have a question.
Yeah, the question is, does your solution cover Canadian taxes as well?
Yes, absolutely. Great question. Thanks for asking that. We do. So our North American subscription includes both US and Canada. We also have global information. We do VAT calculations. We do returns filing. In other countries, we have a pretty big global presence. We have offices around the world. So it is a global solution, as well as US and Canada. So since we have a couple of extra minutes, and there aren't a lot of, if you have questions, please put them in the chat. I'm happy to address them. But since we have a couple of extra minutes, I'd love to be able to show you our dashboard. So if you take 1 second, I want to show you what the application actually looks like.
There it is.
Can you see it? All right. So just to show you that it's a user-friendly system, it's a web-based application. We are a cloud-based solution. So again, nothing to install locally. Oh, and one of the things I didn't mention, which I probably should have, is because we're a cloud-based application and we keep up with all the rates, rules, and boundaries on our side. Sorry, IT folks on the phone. There's nothing really for you to do on an ongoing basis. We plug into your system. There are no updates, no clunky rate updates or anything that you have to run. You just access all of our information in real time. So this is our web-based dashboard. So the two main things are the transactions tab and the returns tab. So you'll have all of your transactions would come through, and I'll just show you, this might be a day's worth of invoices. These are those items that I told you. If I just drill into one of these, each of these fields here are the data that come across to us that we use to calculate tax. So you can see the origin address here, the destination address, this is a committed invoice, this is the date of that invoice, etc. It's all non-identifiable information that comes across. We use that data, and in a split second, literally less than a second, we're able to calculate tax for every item on your invoice. So you can see in my example here, this customer sold some software, some services, and another type of services. So we know how those items were taxed. Here's the tax rates. That one was taxed at 10%, it looks like. If I drill into that, you can literally see the detail of each of those taxing jurisdictions. So here in Seattle, there were 3 different tax jurisdictions that needed to be applied there, and it was taxable at the 3.6% for the city, 0 for King County, and 0.65% for the state of Washington, excuse me, 6.5% for the state of Washington. So we calculate that tax. What's returned to your invoice is just this total dollar amount for that invoice. That's what you will see, and that's what your customer will see, and the details will stay behind the scenes here. So just a little bit of an idea of what we're doing. And then of course you'll set up your returns. As I mentioned, you'll tell us where you have the responsibility to collect and remit and what the filing frequency is. So you can see here in a sample, let me schedule pick a month where we have some sample data. There we go. So you can see a summary here in my sample company. They had to remit all of these returns. If they had some Canadian ones, and then we've got a whole bunch of US ones here that they had to complete this month. This is a very busy company. So it shows their total tax liability for this month was $251,000. That's the amount that they would remit to Avalara, and we would remit all of those individual returns out for you. So it's right here in the dashboard. There's all kinds of reports that you can use. These are we have 54 total reports in our system. Some of the states have such specific filing requirements that we had to create actual specific reports for them. But you'll use these reconciliation reports here to reconcile with your local GL and make sure that those forms look proper to you before we remit them to the state. So just wanted to give you a quick overview of how easy our dashboard is to use. In the settings tab is where you do all the setup. It's a wizard, walks you through, asks you questions, things like if you select that you have Nexus in Colorado, it's going to prompt you to say, oh, I see you have Nexus in Colorado. Do you also have Nexus in any of these local jurisdictions? So it's a very smart wizard, walks you through the setup, very easy process. The second product that we're talking about, so this is the Avatax product. The second product is Cert Capture. Cert Capture is that web-based document management system specifically for exemption certificates. I won't go into a whole lot of detail other than the main thing is you will manage those here. It has a built-in email and direct mail tool. So our team will actually help you manage and track these certificates and keep them up to date. We can email your customers, do direct mail campaigns, make sure that these are up to date at all times. And the best thing about it, or as one of our sales engineers says, where she drops the mic, is really this search feature. Whatever parameters that auditor asks for when they come in for a sales tax audit, whatever they give you when they ask for exemption certificates, you can go right into this dashboard, put in that customer name. Maybe they want to see all of them for a certain state. Maybe they want to see them for certain dates, certain customers. You can copy and paste customer numbers here. Whatever they give you, you can literally run these reports in a second and less than a minute instead of taking literally weeks or months to dig through files, call customers, upset customers, make copies, provide copies to the auditor. It's just a real hassle to go through this process. So this system takes all of that work off of your desk, and again, it validates them every time you send an invoice across to Avatax. Avatax checks the system to see if there's a certificate on file. So we're validating it every day at the time of sale. One last thing I want to show you, and hopefully we can include this link in our follow-up, Buck, if that's okay with you. We talked at the beginning of the call about Nexus and the different rules that are in place. Avalara is keeping up a website that really summarizes all that news out here, and we'll send you this link. You can actually just type in Sales Tax 360 and this site will come up. But it shows you that in these states that are blue here, and look at these central states, big manufacturing states, where states have already implemented tax economic nexus rules. So all of my calls in the last couple of weeks have been from companies like yours that say, how in the world are we going to know if we've established nexus or we need to register in additional states? This website is super helpful and will give you a good insight. And if you scroll down below that map there, there's actually some detail on each state. So you can see here the state of Connecticut, their economic nexus ruling is going to go into play as of December 1st. And if I want to see detail on that, it's literally going to take me over to either an Avalara article where we've done some research, or it will take you directly to that state's Department of Revenue website where they've provided some detail. So this is the detail. So if you want to see what's going on and what their specific requirements are, maybe what the grace period is or whatever their rules are, you can easily just click there and get this information. Avalara does offer Nexus studies. We are highly recommending, if you have not done one recently, to do a Nexus study with us or with your CPAs. Ours are cheaper, faster because we do them all day long, but a lot of people want to work with their CPAs. I want to emphasize that a Nexus study with us, the results is just a report. We are not your tax advisor, so we expect that you'll take that report back to your CPAs internally, talk with our consultants, and make decisions on where you want to get registered. We can help you with those registrations, or your CPAs can. If any historical filings are due, even if they're $0, we can help you do those historical filings and get you up to date. We have a whole team of people that do this. And then we will also manage or track your Nexus activities on an ongoing basis. We have something called Nexus monitoring. So once you've done that initial Nexus study with us and we have a baseline, we can monitor your activities and your total revenues on a quarterly or annual basis for you. So you won't have to keep coming back to these websites and double checking or seeing whether you've hit this $250,000 minimum or over 200 invoices, because we'll have all of that information in your dashboard. But as I mentioned, states have already put these economic nexus laws into place. Here's one. Maine started last October. Minnesota's considering it, start date to be determined. So all sorts of information that you can find out here through this, this website, and a great resource for all the questions that you have in your mind about the recent rulings in the current Nexus environment. And that's all I have, Beck.
Okay,
So
fantastic.
We're good.
And any other questions? No? Okay, I think we're absolutely great. So Kathy, you will follow up and send a recording of our webinar today, and we'll also send you the link to the Nexus website that Maria highlighted here just a second ago. And let's see. Oh, there it is. So Sherilyn put it, it's on the chat, but I'll make sure we send that to you in an email as well, Kathy. And
we'll forward that out to everyone.
Okay, fantastic. And then Kathy, if anybody has questions, would you like them to direct them to you, or would you like them to direct to Avalara?
Either way is fine, but as I said, I'll be following up with everyone with a copy of the recording and the link that was just put out here by Cher. So certainly I can get any questions answered for you that you'd like.
Okay, wonderful. Well, thanks again, and thank you, Antoine. Really appreciate all of the information you shared with us today. And again, thank you, Kathy, for your partnership, and Maria for the great presentations you always deliver. So have a great day, everyone. And I think that's a wrap.
Okay, thank you.